Okay, let's dive in. We're tackling just one of the most talked about, legally tangled, and frankly tragic cases of this century. I'm talking about the 2007 murder of the British student Meredith Kercher in Perugia, Italy.
It really was a global sensation, and the legal twists and turns. I mean, it's incredibly complex. Contested evidence, multiple trials, reversals. It's a lot.
Yeah, and that's why this deep dive feels necessary. The source material is, well, it's dense. It covers 7 years of investigation, trials, appeals, acquittals, convictions being overturned.
It's a real roller coaster, and I think the only way to really understand it, beyond all the media noise, is to track the timeline and, crucially, the evidence.
So that's our mission today. We're going to try and map out the sort of parallel legal journeys of the three main people involved.
Right. Meredith Kercher's American roommate, Amanda Knox.
Oh, Knox's Italian boyfriend at the time, Raffaele Sollecito.
And the man who was ultimately convicted of the murder, Rudy Guade.
And we really need to follow the science here, or maybe, the problems with the collection of scientific evidence, because that seems central to how this whole thing unfolded.
Definitely. But before we get into the weeds of the case, we absolutely have to start with the victim.
Of course.
Meredith Susanna Kara Kercher. Friends called her Mez. She was 21, studying in Perugia on exchange from the University of Leeds back in the UK.
Had big plans, right? Wanted to work for the EU, maybe journalism.
Yeah, ambitious. She was living in this 4-bedroom flat, Via della Pergola 7, shared it with 2 Italian women, and Amanda Knox.
Okay, so setting the scene. The tragedy really begins November 2nd, 2007. That's when her body was discovered.
That's right. Knox and Sollecito said they came back to the flat. They noticed the front door was open, which immediately felt wrong. And they saw a broken window in another roommate's bedroom. Looked like maybe a break-in had happened.
So they called the police.
They called the emergency number, yeah. When the police got there, they eventually had to break down Meredith's door because it was locked.
And inside?
Inside, they found her body, lying on the floor, covered by a duvet.
The initial findings from the scene, the autopsy, they painted a pretty grim picture.
Oh, absolutely brutal. The autopsy found 16 bruises, 7 cuts. The fatal wound was a deep cut to her neck.
And the report suggested signs of sexual violence.
Yeah.
An attempt to immobilize her.
Yes. The injuries, particularly certain ones, strongly suggested that, according to the pathologist who reviewed it, a clear picture of a violent struggle.
Okay, so here's where the investigation starts. And it seems like it took a very specific direction almost immediately.
It really did. This is a critical point. The lead investigator on the scene, Detective Superintendent Monica Napoleoni, she concluded within hours of the discovery.
Hours. Wow.
Yeah, that the signs of the break-in, that broken window specifically, were faked. Staged as a deliberate deception, was the quote.
Okay, hold on. If they decide right away the break-in is staged.
It completely changes the narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes from potentially a random intruder to something internal. Someone inside the house or connected to it.
Exactly. And that assumption immediately put the focus squarely on the people living there and their circle, primarily Knox and Sollecito.
Right. So what was their initial account?
Knox said she'd spent the night of the murder, November 1st, at Sollecito's apartment. They'd smoked marijuana, watched a movie, melee, had sex. Pretty standard stuff.
But Sollecito.
Well, Sollecito initially told police he wasn't entirely sure if Knox had been with him the whole evening. That little bit of uncertainty, added fuel to early suspicions.
But then things get procedurally very questionable, right, with Knox's interviews.
Extremely questionable. This is a major point that came up later in appeals. Over the next 4 days, Knox was interviewed repeatedly, sometimes late into the night, crucially, without a lawyer present.
4 days, no lawyer, intense questioning.
Yeah, under what the appeal judges later called great psychological pressure. And during that period, she eventually changed her story. She implicated herself and also Patrick Lumumba.
Lumumba owned the bar where she worked part-time.
That's the one. So this statement given under duress without counsel, that became the basis for the initial arrests.
So let's recap that. You've got the immediate police theory, staged break-in. Then you get Knox's pressured statement implicating herself and Lumumba.
Put those together and bang. November 6, 2007, Knox, Sollecito, and Lumumba are all arrested for murder.
And that's the story the world heard first. The roommate, the boyfriend, the bar owner.
Pretty much, but then hard science started to push back against that narrative.
The fingerprints.
Exactly. Just about 2 weeks later, November 19th, fingerprints found at the crime scene were matched.
Not to Knox or Sollecito.
Nope. Matched to Rudy Guade. an Ivorian migrant who had a bit of a history locally, some prior break-ins.
Didn't he get caught shortly before this in a nursery school or something? With a knife?
Yes, just days before Kercher's murder. Police found him inside a nursery school after a break-in. He had an 11-inch knife taken from the school's kitchen, so he was already on the radar for concerning behavior.
So the moment Guidi's prints are matched at the scene, that has completely changed the direction of the investigation, right?
You'd think so. Lumumba was released pretty quickly, his alibi checked out. Guaida had fled to Germany, but he was arrested there and extradited back to Italy.
And he chose a different trial route.
He did. He opted for a fast-track trial. It's a different procedure, held in closed session, usually results in a reduced sentence if convicted.
And his story in court, I remember hearing it was unusual.
Unusual is putting it mildly. It was bizarre. He claimed he'd gone to the house to meet Meredith, that they'd had a consensual encounter, kissed, touched, but no sex.
Okay.
Then he claimed he got sudden stomach pains, went to the bathroom, the main bathroom, which was quite far from Meredith's room, and while he was in there, he heard her scream.
Right. And then what? He just stayed in the bathroom.
According to him, he came out, saw a shadowy figure fleeing the scene, and this figure supposedly said, in perfect Italian, mind you.
Perfect Italian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the phrase trovato negro, trovato colpevole, andiamo, which means found black man, found culprit, let's go.
Wait, seriously. A shadowy figure conveniently says that in perfect Italian and then runs off. Did anyone buy that?
The court certainly didn't. It sounded like a clumsy attempt to frame someone else and inject race into it. More importantly, his story completely contradicted key physical evidence.
The palm print.
The palm print, stained with Meredith Kercher's blood, found on the pillow from her single bed underneath her disrobed body.
And Guaid claimed.
He insisted he'd left her fully dressed, so the bloody palm print under the body just blew his story apart.
That's pretty damning.
Absolutely insurmountable. So October 2008, Guaid was found body, sexual assault and murder.
What was the sentence?
Initially 30 years, but it got reduced on appeal and then reduced again because of the fast-track procedure. Final sentence was 16 years.
16 years. And he served that.
He served about 13 years, got released to community service in 2020, and then fully released in November 2021.
It's worth noting, briefly, he's had some recent legal trouble again, right? A restraining order.
Yes, in December 2023, allegations of abuse from a former girlfriend led to a restraining order and special surveillance. But that's separate from the Kercher case, of course.
Right. But it's just striking, isn't it? Guaid's path. Caught by Prince, fast trial, conviction, serves time, gets released. It seems almost straightforward compared to what happened with Knox and Sollecito.
It absolutely is, and that's the perfect point to pivot, because while Guaidi's case reached a definitive, albeit contested by him, conclusion relatively quickly, for Knox and Sollecito, the legal labyrinth was just beginning.
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly confusing for people, especially those outside Italy. The multiple trials, the back and forth.
Right, so it's really important for you, the listener, to understand a bit about the Italian legal system here. It's different from, say, the US or UK common law systems.
An appeal isn't just checking for legal errors, is it?
Exactly. An appeal in Italy, especially the first level, is essentially a new trial. They can re-examine all the evidence, recall witnesses, hear new arguments. A conviction isn't truly final until all appeal stages are exhausted, potentially going all the way up to the highest court, the Court of Cassation.
Which explains why this dragged on for 7 years.
Precisely. So after Guaid's conviction, Knox and Sollecito faced their first major trial. That concluded in 2009.
And they were convicted.
They were. Convicted of murder, Knox got 26 years, Sollecito 25 years.
What was the prosecution's theory at that point? If Guaid was involved, how did they fit Knox and Sollecito in?
It was a complex theory. Essentially, they argued it wasn't just Guaid, but that all three were involved. The prosecution suggested Knox might have taunted Meredith, maybe over hygiene or something. It escalated, and Knox delivered the fatal stab wound, with Sollecito involved, and then they jointly staged the break-in with Guaid.
Okay, so a group attack theory.
Right. But then came the first appeal trial in 2011, and this was a game changer.
Because of the independent forensic review.
Exactly. The appeal court ordered a completely independent review of the key forensic evidence used to convict them. And the findings were, well, explosive.
What did they find? Or rather, what did they not find?
The reviewers highlighted, and I quote, numerous basic errors in how the original police investigators collected and analyzed the evidence. It was scathing.
Okay, so what were the key pieces of evidence they re-examined?
Two main things. First, the alleged murder weapon. This was a large kitchen knife found at Sollecito's apartment.
The one Knox supposedly used.
That was the theory. But the independent review found no confirmed trace of Meredith Kercher's DNA on that knife. None.
No victim DNA on the supposed murder weapon. That's a huge problem for the prosecution.
A massive problem. And the second piece was the victim's bra clasp. It was found at the scene weeks later, actually.
Weeks later.
Yeah, which is already a bit strange. Anyway, the original investigation found Sollecito's DNA on this tiny metal clasp that was used to place him at the scene, potentially struggling with her.
But the independent review?
The independent experts testified that the way the clasp was collected and handled, the context strongly suggested contamination.
Contamination. That sounds bad in a forensic context. What does that practically mean?
It means they couldn't be sure his DNA got there during the crime. It could have been transferred accidentally afterwards, maybe by investigators handling different items, or just because the collection was so delayed and poorly managed, it basically renders the DNA finding unreliable.
So the two key pieces of physical evidence linking them essentially fell apart under scrutiny.
They completely crumbled. And based on this forensic breakdown, the result in 2011 was dramatic.
Acquittal.
Acquittal. Knox and Sollecito were cleared of the murder charges and released from prison immediately. Knox flew straight back to the U.S.
And the judge's reasoning.
Their written report was incredibly critical of the initial investigation. They said the guilty verdict was not corroborated by any objective element of evidence. They also highlighted the obsessive duration and great psychological pressure of Knox's initial interrogations. Basically, they dismantled the prosecution's entire case.
It wasn't over.
No, this is Italy. The prosecution appealed the acquittal to the highest court, the Court of Cassation. And that court, in 2013, did something that shocked many observers.
They overturned the acquittal.
They annulled it. They cited manifest illogicalities in the appeal court's reasoning, essentially disagreeing with how the acquittal verdict was reached. They ordered a whole new appeal trial to be held, this time in Florence.
So, back to square one, almost. Another trial.
Pretty much. This new appeal trial happened in 2014, and incredibly, despite the established forensic problems, they were convicted again.
Wait, how? Did new evidence emerge?
That's the truly baffling part. During that 2014 trial, they even tested a new sample from the alleged murder weapon, the knife from Sollecito's place, a previously unexamined trace.
And did they find Meredith's DNA this time?
No. Still nothing. Zero Kercher DNA. Yet the Florence court convicted them anyway.
So even with more evidence showing no link, they still got convicted. What was the logic there?
It seemed that court put more weight back onto the initial circumstantial elements. The staged break-in theory, Knox's initial confused statements, Sollecito's initial uncertainty. They appeared to prioritize the narrative over the, frankly, absent or contaminated physical evidence linking Knox and Sollecito to the actual murder scene.
That seems difficult to reconcile with the scientific findings.
It was highly controversial, but it set the stage for one final, definitive appeal.
Back to the Court of Cassation in Rome, the highest court, 2015.
Yes. This was the final word.
Yeah.
And in March 2015, they delivered it.
Acquittal again.
Definitive exoneration. They annulled the 2014 convictions without ordering any further trials. It was over.
And crucially, the wording was important, wasn't it? It wasn't just not enough evidence.
That's absolutely key. They didn't just say there was insufficient evidence, which can leave a cloud of suspicion, like a not proven verdict in Scotland. They explicitly ruled that Knox and Sollecito had not committed the crime. They were declared innocent of the murder charge.
Innocent.
Yeah.
It's a much stronger declaration.
It's a profound legal difference.
Yeah.
The lead judge, Gennaro Marasca, laid out the reasoning very clearly. He stated there was a complete lack of biological evidence connecting Knox or Sollecito to the actual murder room or to Meredith's body.
Well, Guaidi's traces were.
Exactly. Marasca pointed out that, in contrast, numerous traces were found attributable to Guaidi in the room and on the body. The physical evidence pointed solely to him.
And the court didn't hold back on criticizing the investigation itself, did it?
Not at all. The final verdict was scathing about the initial police work. They used phrases like sensational investigative failures, amnesia, and culpable omissions. They stated that the scientific evidence should have been central, and the failures in collecting and analyzing it were fatal to the prosecution's case against Knox and Sollecito.
So the highest court essentially blamed the investigation for the whole mess.
That's a fair summary. They laid the responsibility for the prolonged legal battle and the wrongful convictions squarely at the feet of the initial investigators and the flawed forensic process.
Was anything upheld? Any conviction at all?
Yes. One minor charge against Knox stood. The conviction for slander calunnia in Italian for wrongly accusing Patrick Lumumba during those initial pressured interrogations, that was upheld, but she didn't receive any further sentence for it, having already served nearly 4 years.
Okay, so pulling this all together,
Yeah.
what's the big picture takeaway?
You have this awful, tragic murder. The person whose physical evidence undeniably placed him at the scene, Rudy Guard, was convicted and served his sentence.
But the intense, almost immediate focus on the roommate and her boyfriend.
Based on a very early, questionable assumption about a staged break-in and a coerced statement.
Led to 7 years of legal hell for them. Multiple trials, convictions, acquittals, reversals. All driven, ultimately, by what Italy's highest court called fundamental investigative failures and unreliable forensic science.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, how critical those first hours of an investigation are, how easily assumptions can derail things, and how vital proper evidence handling is. Once contamination happens or mistakes are made, it's incredibly hard to undo.
And the media played such a huge role throughout. The source material notes this intense international spotlight. You had American media arguing she couldn't get a fair trial, while apparently Knox's own lawyers sometimes found the U.S. media campaigns unhelpful for their legal strategy in Italy.
It was a media circus, undeniably. Both pro-Knox and anti-Knox narratives were incredibly strong.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder. In a case like this, where the core scientific evidence against two suspects was eventually shown to be so flawed, maybe even non-existent, did all that intense international media attention actually help or hinder the final outcome?
Did the spotlight, the constant questioning from outside, ultimately pressure the Italian system towards that final, rigorous examination of the facts by the Supreme Court? Or did it just muddy the waters and make a dispassionate focus on the evidence harder for everyone involved for years?
Yeah, was it a help or a hindrance to justice finally focusing on the flawed science? Something to think about?